Alright, in this video I'm going to show you guys how to use Python. I'm going to do a very general introduction to Python for people who are very new to it, and if you've already programmed in Python or you have some past programming experience, this might be too simple, so you may want to skip ahead to my next video, which I think will be a little more advanced. But right now I'm going to real quick show you guys how to install Python. It's very simple. It's going to go Python in our Google search, and it should be the top result. And the version, you're going to first go to downloads, and the version you're going to want to get is Python 2.75. If you're on Mac, Python usually comes pre-installed, and you can access it through your terminal. You'll just type Python and it'll already start up. You may want to update it, and you can do the same thing by just going to the Mac installer. So you just click this, it'll start a download, and you'll just run through the installer. It's super easy, nothing big there. The other thing I'm going to show you real quick is you're going to want to go to My Computer, right click on it, go to Properties, it'll bring up this box, and you're going to go to Advanced Settings, Environment Variables, and then you're going to scroll, scroll all the way down till you see Paths, and then you're going to edit this, and at the very end you're going to put a semicolon, and then you're going to go and find where Python installed. On my computer, it's installed right here on my C drive, and I'm pretty sure that's kind of the default place for it to install. It usually goes there. You just want to find the folder that the python.exe is in, and you're going to copy this address right here, and you're going to paste it right at the end after that semicolon, right there, and you're going to hit OK. I don't need to do this because I've already done it before, so I'm just going to hit OK. And then after you hit OK, you're going to want to restart your computer for the changes to take effect. And what that does is it allows you to type in Python right here, and it'll start up the Python interpreter. And if you didn't do that, you'll have to copy this address right here every time you want to run Python. And I'll show you what that looks like. So you'll paste this in, and then you'll go /python.exe, and that's how you run it. So what the paths variable does is it makes it so that you only have to type in Python if you want to be able to run it. Otherwise you'd have to type in the full path to Python. And that just makes it simpler, especially if you're going to be running Python a lot like I do. So I definitely advise that. Without further ado, let's get into some basics of Python. The first thing I'm going to teach you guys about is variables and some very basic data types that come stock with Python. So let's do a few here. Okay, let's define a variable, and then I'll kind of explain what it does and how you use it. So let's call this my string equals hello. So all a variable really is just a named value. You are assigning the value of hello to a variable name. And when we hit enter and we type in print my string, it'll give you back the value, which is hello. And these are really important. You'll use them all the time in programming, and it's pretty universal to every programming language that I'm aware of. There are different data types that you can assign to a variable. In Python, it's pretty loose, as in you don't have to usually specify what data type it needs to be, though there are a few things you'll have to learn about that, which I'll go through in a sec. So for instance, you could say my number equals 5, and that'll assign the value of 5 to this variable named my number. And you can name these whatever you want. I'm pretty sure they can't start with a number as the name, but yeah, and they can't have spaces in them. and that will assign a value to my number, and that'll print out the value of 5. And real quick, as a side note, if you don't say print here, it'll still output the value. If you noticed, I put print here. But once you actually get into writing a script inside of like a text editor, this is more for like just testing things. You will want to write print, because otherwise it won't print anything to the screen. And so let's get into a few different data types. Let's start with strings. I already defined a variable up here, and we can start working with that. So let's go print my string, and if we put a bracket, a square bracket like this, and we put in a value of 0, we're going to reference the first letter in this string, because in Python things are always indexed starting at 0, so it'll print out an H, as you can see. And we can do that again, and if we put in -1, that'll give you the end, it'll give you an O. Or if we put in, let's say, 2, that'll give me an L, because you're going 0, 1, 2, you see? And that's a pretty universal way of doing things in a lot of different data types, which I will show you in a second. And it's very useful. So let's get into the next data type, because strings are pretty simple. I'll show you more stuff with strings later on, but for right now, that should be enough. Let's do lists next, because those are pretty interesting and fun. A list is basically just a list of different elements. You can actually have strings in a list, you can have numbers in a list, you could have other data types in a list. So to define a list, let's just go my list, and you can name these whatever you want. I'm just doing it because I'm lazy and I can't think of what else I would name it. So let's call this item 1, and that is in quotes because it's going to be a string, which is just all a string is just a list of individual characters in a specific order, aka text. And then I'm going to put a comma there, which denotes that there's another list item here, which is going to be item 2. And now I have a list, so I can go print my list. And as you can see, there are 2 items. And if I go print my list 0, that'll give me item 1. Or print my list 1, it'll give me item 2. Very simple, same thing as with strings, but you're actually printing out individual items rather than individual letters. So that's how that works. The next type of data type I will show you is called a dictionary, and these can be pretty useful, and they're kind of similar to lists in some ways. So let's go my dict, and the way to define this is in these curly brackets. And just as a side note, lists always have these square brackets. Dictionaries always have these curly brackets. That's how Python knows that there are different data types. And the way you use these is instead of accessing a value at a specific index, like 1, 2, 3, it'll have an actual named index. So that's what this is. I'll call this key. You can call it whatever you want. You just have to remember to use that as the key to access the value that you're going to get, and I'll show you what that means in a sec. And I'll call this value 1, and you can put whatever value you want there. And then let's call this key 2, and let's call this value 2. So that's a dictionary. You can have as many values as you want. It's pretty much just limited to your computer's space, or RAM space. And then to actually get a value from this, you'll go print my dict, and then you'll access one of the values. Let's access value 2 by going key 2, and that'll print out, whoops, added an extra letter, sorry. That'll print out value 2. And you can do the same thing with value, or with key, just key, and that'll print out value 1. And you can put, you could put a list as value 1 or value 2 if you wanted to, and that's why these are kind of powerful, because you can just name reference them rather than referencing them by a number. And then the last data type I'm going to show you guys today is called a tuple, and these are kind of handy. They're very similar to a list, except for you can only have 2 items per tuple in it. So let's go like this: my tuple equals, and instead of doing a square bracket or a curly bracket, you'll do a parentheses, which denotes for Python that it's a tuple, and you'll have value 1 and value 2. And with these, you can do the same thing with all the other ones, as all the other ones, where you can put in a number or a string or some other data type in there if you wanted to. In this case, I'm just doing strings because it's simple. And then you can do the same thing by printing my tuple at 0, and that'll give me the first one, and then at 1, and that'll give me the second one. And you can also do -1, which will give you the last, but it's kind of not necessary with tuples, since you'll always know that a tuple can only contain 2 values, and if you add more values to it, it'll give you an error. So all of this is, I might have gone over this pretty quick, and I hope that you understood it, but all this really does is just explains what you can use in Python. There's a lot of other data types, and you can even define your own, but we'll get into that later. But these are kind of the basics of what you have to work with just starting up Python. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this document, which I will delete, and show you a few things that you can do that are a little more advanced, but still very basic, and you can and they will be very useful in the future of your programming experience if you do continue on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define a variable that'll contain a string. Let's just call it my string. Oops, my string. Let's just call it, or just give it a value of hello. And then I'm going to show you how to do logic in programming. And this is probably the most important thing in programming. Like, you'll use it all the time. And the basic construct of this is the if statement. And the if statement is like, if some condition is true, then do this. So in this case, let's go if my string dot ends with O, whoops, not 0, O, then I'm gonna put a colon there, print the string ended with O. Okay, so basically all this does is you're checking if the string's last letter was an O. This is a Python function that comes built in, and it only works on strings as far as I know, and there are tons of these functions. I'll show you how to get to those and like how to find them. All you do is you go to Python string methods, or whatever you want, just Python docs basically, and you'll go to this docs.python.org, and that'll have all the documentation for all the different functions and values or whatever you want. And you're going to want to make sure that this is at 275, since that's what we're working with. Otherwise, if you were working on 3.4 or 3.3, you could do documentation specific to that, but it's going to be a little different. So then let's search for ends with. So So as you can see, this is stir, which stands for string. So this is a string specific function. It's only going to work with strings, and it'll tell you what it does. And basically it returns true. It says, it gives the if statement a true if this value did end with whatever you put in here. And in this case it will return true. And then the next thing you do is you go else, which is kind of like a catch-all. It's like, if this was not true, it doesn't matter what this condition was, just as long as it's not true, it'll always default to the else statement. So then we can go print the string did not end with O. Oops, O. Okay, so that's pretty simple. And there's an unlimited amount of things you can check in here. You could check numbers, you could check whatever, as long as it's a logical statement that works in Python. And then the last thing you can do with this is elif, which is else if, but they abbreviate it in Python, and it's ELIF. And that's like, so it'll first check this statement to see if it's true. If this statement wasn't true, then it'll jump down to this. If this statement's true, then it'll print or it'll do whatever you tell it to do below it. If it's not true, it'll jump down to the else statement. So you can make these huge trees of them. You can do another elif, or as many as you want, and you can even do crazy stuff like putting another if statement inside of this if you wanted to. And here's one other really important thing that I totally forgot to mention, and I'm sorry about that, is indenting. Python needs to be indented. If it's after like an if statement or something like that, with that whatever has like this colon at the end of it, that means that this next line has to be indented by a tab length, or I think that's also equal to 4 spaces. And if you don't do that, you'll get a lot of errors. And the great thing about this, like, it might be a pain in the butt at first, but you'll definitely start liking it after a while, because in old school programming languages you'd always have to do like if, and then you'd also have to do these brackets here, and then the statement would be in here, and then you'd have to follow that with this bracket, and Python cleans all that up so it's a lot more readable by just doing indents. I think it's a lot cleaner, and you should be doing indents anyway if you're in another programming language. So let's do another check with else if, just to explain more about how this works. So let's go let's go len, which stands for length, which in this case for a string it'll count how many letters are in this string. So in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if len of my string equals 6, then let's do something. So in this case it's not going to be equal to 6 because this is equal to 5. It's 5 letters long. And this equals sign is a way of comparing. So because when you're assigning a value to a variable, you're going to use a single equal sign. You don't want to confuse Python, and you can't confuse Python. It'll actually throw you an error if you try just doing a single equal sign. But with a double equal sign, it's the programming way of saying, is this value equal to this value? And if it is, it's going to say yes, that's true, and it'll run whatever you have in here. For in this case, let's print the string was equal. I'm sorry if I misspell things. I'm bad at spelling. To 6. Okay. And the other thing you can do here, you can do greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and these only work with numbers, just by the way, because length, or this len function, returns a number. You can always compare it with another number. and then you can also do not equal to. The exclamation point is the same thing as not, which means like it's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So all that is pretty simple, and if I covered something too fast on this, let me know, and I'll try to explain it better, or go over it again in my next lesson, or if I missed something. It's been quite a while since I've learned a language from scratch, so I'm not 100% sure, where everyone's at, and how much I need to explain things, but I hope this makes sense. And then for now, let's comment this out, which in Python you can do by putting these little hash marks in front of everything, and that's basically the way of saying, Python, don't read this, like it doesn't mean anything, so you don't need to look over it. And that way you won't get any errors if you put anything in a comment. If you're saving this for later, or you just don't need it right now, or whatever. In this case, I don't need it right now, so I'm commenting it out. And then the next thing I'm going to go over real quick is, real quickly, I'm going to show you how to do loops. And loops are super important in any programming language. It's basically the way that you repeat a task over and over and over again until some condition is met or something is finished. So in this case, there are two types of loops in Python that I am aware of. There's a while loop, and then there's a for loop. So, and I'll get into these more in detail later because they're so useful. You can do so much stuff with them. So with a for loop, I'm gonna go let's go for char in my string. And remember, you have to end it with this colon, just like you do in the if statement. Otherwise, it'll throw an error. And it'll in a good text editor, like I'm using Sublime Text 2, which I think is a pretty decent text editor. It'll auto indent because it knows that this is Python and it knows that it has to. Otherwise, you'll get an error. So, in this loop, basically all this is doing is it's saying, look for the smallest, or the smallest thing that you can split this string into. In which case, in this case, it's individual characters. So every time you split the string, assign it to this character. And let me demonstrate it before I get into too much of like how it works. Let's just go print char, and I'll save this. And the way to get back to doing that, or to be able to run this, is I'm going to first exit by calling this exit command out of the Python interpreter. And then this is where I saved it, so I'm just going to go, I'm going to write in here Python, and then you're going to drag whatever file you have that you want to run in Python in front of this Python command. I'm going to give it a space, and then you can hit enter. And in this case, as you can see, it'll split up hello into each individual character on its own line. So that's what a loop does. You can do, crazy amounts of stuff with it. But basically all it's doing is it's saying, until I reach the end of the loop, let's split this into the 0 element, the 1 element, the 2 element, the 3 element, until I reach the last element and split that, and then it'll stop. So that's what the for loop does. And you can use this also for lists. So with a list, you can go like my list equals, whoops, sorry, here we go. My list equals, value 1, comma, value 2, comma, oops, value 3. Okay, and now we can go for list item, and this list item variable name that I'm giving it. I can change that to whatever I want. I'm just doing it like this because it's kind of a good practice to make your variable names kind of understandable, and that way if someone else is going to read your code later on, they can hopefully understand what your code does a lot easier than if you just make obscure values like I don't know, SE or something, SE. That would make no sense. But list item makes sense because that's what it actually is going to be. It's going to be an individual list item, and then in my list. And now I can go print my list, or I mean not my list, sorry, list item. If I were to write print my list, it would print this thing 3 times because there's 3 values in the list. But because I'm printing the list item, it'll print value 1, value 2, value 3. And I'll show you that. There we go. See value 1, value 2, value 3. And you can also do interesting stuff with lists. You can nest them, so you can put another list inside of a list if you wanted to. For instance, if I put another loop inside of, you can nest loops, sorry, I think I said nest lists. You can do that too, but you can nest loops, and if I put another for loop in here and loop through again, it's going to do what it did for the hello, because these are strings, so it'll split value 1 into V, A, L, you know, each one individually. And I'm not going to demonstrate that right now because it is kind of unnecessary. You can do that on your own time if you want. And you can also, you know, do if statements and things like that inside of a loop. That way you can check individual values rather than checking, let's say, something for the whole list. I hope that this all makes sense. If it doesn't, you know, let me know, and I'll try to clarify whatever I can in the next video, or leave me a comment and I'll try to help you out if this doesn't make sense. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this, and have a great day, and I'll hopefully be back soon with the next lesson. And any feedback also would be greatly appreciated. If you have questions, or you would like me to do something differently, let me know. Thank you guys.